Rain spatters and tings off the low rooftops. A long final drag from the cigarette. The lone figure flicks the burned stump and opens the door to the Raconteur collection. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Our music is provided by the wonderfully talented Tylercunningham. I am joined, as always, by the tallest and eldest of the six. Charlie, how are you doing?
Hello.
I just want to say, I think I nailed the intro.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, like,
Compared to yours, yeah, it's trash, but
out of 5 stars, you say, we're breaching 2.3. I'm just kidding.
I would say so.
I thought it was
rate us of 5 stars and
give us a review
all
on
right.
Whatever service.
So we enjoyed a nice weekend away this past weekend at a place called Robbers Cave. It's a state park in the state that we live in, obviously, and really great to just be away from everything for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
It had been a couple of years since we had been there, so I don't know about you, but I'm feeling nice and relaxed. The day after we got home, I guess, which was yesterday, Monday, super lazy day. I mean,
yeah,
stayed inside. I think we went grocery shopping. That's all we did. So,
yeah,
pretty easy.
Yeah.
How about you?
I really enjoyed it. I kind of wish that overall the trip had been more restful. I feel like just with how crowded everything was, and especially for me, I wish I'd had like my own cabin that I could have gone to, like, okay, I can go here and I can recharge, and then come back and join the whole family, as our father likes to say. That's saying, I mean, it's not that I don't mind being around them, but when it's, 26 people, and
26 people, and we're all fully grown,
right?
Like we're all adults. So
yeah,
it's a bit rough. We definitely need to go sometime when it's just the elders, and by that I just mean
that would be fun.
Like you and me and a few others. Well,
you and me and that's it.
You and me and just a few.
You record a podcast outside.
So over here.
And here's
at
the edge of the cliff.
The mountain. Clue?
What are we talking about today?
Today,
no,
we're covering. We're talking a topic. We're talking a topic that is very prevalent. In your life. And I hope you have a few words to say about it.
Yeah, this is the first time we're hearing about this. Yeah. Oh, wow, writing. I didn't know we were doing that today.
Yeah, I mean, you made that very believable with all that writing you do. You know how to tell a story. And what sounds good.
I hope so. I hope so, right?
I just want to, because I think we both were into it when we were younger. You're still into it, obviously. I'm not. And I branched off way earlier, and I was never super into it, but I did try to write a couple quote unquote books, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But you actually have written a book. It's in basically the alpha stages right now, and so I just kind of want to go over a few different points and questions, and you and I can just talk about things for a while, and
we can.
We'll see where it goes. I
feel like every episode.
This whole thing.
I feel like every episode we do is getting worse for headphones users. We have so many more gross sounds going on, and
that's not too bad though. Yeah, those are bad. Let me just take a drink here.
Ew.
Now,
sound kind of like a wet fart.
We grew up in a very fantasy, sci-fi kind of household. I feel like our dad loved all that kind of stuff. Conan, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Narnia, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff. So we were exposed to that. a lot during our early childhood. I think that definitely, like, helped us wrap our minds around like just these giant adventures in these fantasy worlds. Because things like Narnia, like that world it's a really big world, and there's so many stories that are told in just that, like the books that we know. And then you have Lord of the Rings and all that kind of fun stuff. So,
and even bigger
I don't know
world.
I was a bit. I lost my train of thought. Anyways, so what kind of inspired you when you first started getting into just thinking up ideas for your own, like, stories, like our games we play outside? What really kind of started sticking with you early on?
So for me, I think it probably starts, I've thought about this a lot because when I first started writing, I was like, man, there's nobody else in our family that writes. Lo and behold, there are others, especially on my dad's side. And even our dad has come up with some, even if he doesn't write like all of the time, he's definitely come up with some really good ideas that'd be fun to bring up later. But I think for me, it starts with dad's stories that he used to tell us, like basically his bedtime stories that were continuing adventure stories that would take place and kind of be an extension of like the early like Dungeons and Dragons games we used to play, where it would basically be like, oh my gosh, we were adventurers going on. A lot of them revolved around like Princess Bride, like we were journeying with like, like the different characters in that and going on adventures. And I'm sure he just had a wealth of books and like storylines he could pull from. But for me, that's probably why I can be so, I running like D&D games now. It's so easy for me just to make up something on the spot. Not to be like, oh man, I'm just really good at what I do. Because people will be like, how do you just come up with that stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. Like it literally just comes to my head. I just take the feedback and I just output genius. You know what I'm saying?
I just keep regurgitating these bits and pieces of just genius. No, like, I mean, I agree. Like when I don't often, but when I sit down and play D&D with you or the group and stuff like that, there's definitely like a lot of like dad energy that comes out when you're telling stories and the details you're describing and the characters, and like they all have different voices. There's like a pool of like three voices you pull from, but they all have different voices. And it's just, you really set
it's the regular characters that have this voice right here. We're gonna go do this. There's the crazy people. Ah, yes. If you were to travel over the mountains. And then there's just like, I think my new favorite one is the voice I've been doing for goblins, which is just
kind of like a Murloc.
Yeah, kind of like a Murloc.
What are we doing? Or like the orcs from like Warcraft. What do you ask of me?
That's probably really expiring, just clicking. I remember, that was a big revelation. Having, like StarCraft and Warcraft, and you could click on the units multiple times and they would eventually read out really like complex dialogue. Like they didn't need to do that. What a nice little thing to like add in.
It was, definitely like an early like Easter egg kind of a thing, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so like, but I remember like when we were kids and the bedtime stories and just how animatedly like he would describe everything and just the way he would say things. It was definitely something like whenever I tell stories and like when I want to tell something that's entertaining, I kind of do the same thing. I try to bring it to life as much as possible. And I don't always do the best of it. If you can't tell by listening, sometimes I stumble over my words, and I'm trying to get better and control the pacing and that kind of stuff. But definitely a lot of inspiration from those early days of bedtime stories, early like quote unquote D&D campaigns, because they weren't really D&D campaigns, and just watching Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and like reading and listening to so much Narnia and Harry Potter, like just all the time.
Yeah,
it was always playing.
Yeah, I mean, I even remember some of the darker things. Like, do you remember the Disney movie Black Cauldron?
Ooh, yeah.
It's funny. I watched that recently, and it's not that great of a movie, but
it is dark.
It is dark and kind of cool because it is so dark.
What? There's another Disney movie that's kind of dark, and I can't remember what it is. Oh my gosh. Maybe it wasn't Disney. Shrek?
I mean, what kind of...
It wasn't Shrek. I don't know. There's one I'm thinking of, but I can't describe it or put a name to it. So, nothing there. Anyways, so we got a lot of inspiration, obviously, from our dad and kind of what his side of the family brought over.
Right.
And then I personally didn't get into any writing until, like, I want to say middle school. When I was kind of introduced to, poetry and that kind of thing. And I don't know why it sticks out to me, but I believe haikus were one of the things I really remember sticking with me. That's a 5-7-5 format with syllables, right?
I wonder why.
I don't know. I think it's just because it's short and that's my attention span.
Okay, so yeah, and they do have very clear parameters, so maybe
yeah. And I mean,
that was easier to work with.
I wish I had a longer attention span, but like I think that's what drew me to it. It's just that they were short and sweet, but you could digest a lot from them the more you read them, depending on
right.
who wrote it, if there was a deeper meaning to it, and yada yada yada. And so I kind of first started getting into poetry in like middle school. That's where I kind of first started doing my thing. Where did you kind of first like really start putting pen to paper, pencil to paper, lead to paper?
We talked about it in our last episode, actually.
Quill to ink.
In the childhood memories one. For me, it really started where I had an idea of a story in my head, and I couldn't keep track of all of it, so I started writing it down. And then definitely, and this was coming, but definitely inspired by Kingdom Hearts again. And not only that, but Kingdom Hearts fan fiction. And and then of course the games we would play, all of which we talked about in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to that episode, take a little trot over, slap those reins and get over there.
Yeah, if you're not on a shuffle, just,
yeah,
back it up.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah.
I almost choked on that.
But yeah, just making up my own stories. That's kind of where it came from. And then wanting to keep track of those. And then a lot of the early things that I did write were just Kingdom Hearts fan fiction. So
wasn't there Final Fantasy 2, or am I making that up?
Final Fantasy, I think, inspired the worlds and kind of the fantastical nature that I could do things in, because as much as I do like Kingdom Hearts, I never, and I guess I should clarify, like my Kingdom Hearts fan fiction was always like excluded the Disney side of Kingdom Hearts. There was never like a Donald and Goofy running around in my stories, or there was never a Disney world that we went to. It was more like I liked the idea of going to these different worlds, and so I would make up my own worlds that my character would go to. Which is, I gotta be honest, just like Disney in itself, like there's a nostalgia there. It's cool, it's fine. Everyone likes the Tarzan soundtrack, all that kind of fun stuff. But like, I have, because I have Ellie, I have a daughter. I've listened to the Lion King soundtrack so much. Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm done. I was like, I watched it I think I watched it maybe twice when I was a kid, maybe more, and I just don't remember. But she loves it, and so we watch it all the time. And I'm so done with Disney and everything. And so anytime I hear it outside of the movies, I'm done with it. And even when I saw it in Kingdom Hearts, I was always like, I just don't care. I just don't care.
Right.
Take me back to...
No, that's how I felt, like what sticks out to me most, and I think what you'll still see echoes of and things that I'll talk about later is, the first time that you get to like Hollow Bastion in Kingdom Hearts. And, you have that dramatic music. It's a totally different area. Even, like, the style of the way that place is designed. Castle Oblivion, another one. Traverse Town, Twilight Town, like the places that were all uniquely Kingdom Hearts, the world that never was Kingdom Hearts 2. Those are all of my favorite places. And so kind of what I did is I took those way more standout ideas and then, referencing like Final Fantasy X and just kind of picking and choosing the elements that I wanted to do. So that's a lot of that really informed a lot of my very early writing of just like, oh, hey, I like this. I don't like this. So I'm going to write what I really care about.
Yeah, definitely. And, from those early days of like poetry, because I know it has a name, but I forget what it is. The kind of poetry I would write would be the title of the poem. Like to say it was like never. There'd be 5 lines, and the first letter of each line would spell out never if you like read it straight down.
Oh, like the Dead Space chapters? Nicole is dead.
Basically, yeah, something like that. I don't know if that has called.
I don't know if that is a style. I'm sure it is, but I don't know if it's a style.
I remember. I think Mom actually has a lot of that somewhere in a bin somewhere. Like, not a garbage bin. That's where it should go. But in a bin somewhere.
Sad.
Of just like, because I remember writing so many of those. And I've kind of been wanting to get back into it again, kind of, just because it was I remember it being a kind of a fun outlet and just a place that, just real quick, scribble something down. Didn't think too much about it. But Mom was always like, Jack, you were good at poetry. And I was like, was it really good though? But
yeah, So is this for you still middle school into high school?
Yeah, so kind of that was like, when after I discovered it, a couple months go by, and I kind of started getting more into it on a personal basis, not just in school. Towards like 7th and 8th grade, I actually 7th grade I started this. All I could draw was stick figures. That's all I can draw now. But it was like a stick figure comic. I don't know if you remember this. Yeah. But it was like a prehistoric like caveman stick figure comic.
I do remember.
And I can't remember their names. It might have been like Grow or Grog and something, but one always had like a chisel in his quote unquote ear, so that's how you told them apart. Right. And I remember like I wrote a few, again, quote unquote, issues of that. Right. I don't know where they went, but I remember I did that for like I think 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, I remember trying to scan those into the computer, like with the old like scanner we had. Yeah,
which is horrible.
Yeah, I know, it was so bad.
It was super loud.
Yeah. Yeah, Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I should say, and then that's when I kind of wrote. I'm not gonna say quote unquote again. Just take everything I'm saying, unless I said it seriously as quote unquote. I wrote like 2 or 3 books until like chapter 5 or 6. One was The Emerald Castle, and the other one was Zorathenian's Blade.
Zorathenian's Blade.
Yeah, exactly. Cool names, right? And then the third one, I don't remember the third one, but I did start a third one. And I think the third one is influenced by like Jack 2. I don't know how though. That I just seemingly remember that. And I started those, and I think I made copies of them. I think I gave a copy to a teacher, embarrassingly enough, at one point, to be like, hey, can you read this and tell me if it's good? Right. But I mean, then somewhere along the line, I just dropped off kind of everything. I was like, I don't want to write anymore. I'm fine. So that was like early, going into high school.
Yeah, it was the opposite for me because, going from those early days, that was when I think really got into it, and I developed a fascination for like evil characters. Starting with games, it's funny that you bring it up. Starting with games like Jak 2, like a character having a dark side, or like
I want to kill Praxis.
Really like that. Even going back to have to give a shout out to Dark Cloud, and I don't remember his name, but the evil guy in that, who was not really evil, but No, he was possessed by the genie. That white-haired guy.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
But I always liked kind of those dark and brooding characters. Like, I was like, oh man, this character is so cool. Go like Cloud. I
mean, Cloud is just cool. Come on.
But yeah, I would say it's in high school that I started writing continuously, and I filled up like notebooks and notebooks of just stories of not even art for the things I was writing, but I would doodle a lot. That's kind of what at first I thought I wanted to be an artist. That kind of plateaued out for me, but I always still had the writing. And I mean, I went as far, Jack, to like even create like
Seda.
Okay, that kind of rings a bell. Seda. Yeah. But, I even went as far as to write out like different ages in history. Like I remember one specific one was that at some point in the world I made, that world would get invaded by essentially the other world. So there was like a parallel dimension, and this parallel dimension figured out how to like tear open rifts into the world, and they had like different technology and different and I remember it was all like, I think I drew out it was like a submachine gun, but like the operation on it was like a gear that like launched bullets. Like just crazy stuff like that, where I would see, different things and be like, oh, I kind of like this thing, and kind of just add it on there. My early character had like a dark side to him that was like alive and sentient and something he had to struggle against. There was a great evil early on. I mean, they were called the Dark Five, and they were like evil and corrupt and scary, and
the Dark Five,
right? Which it's funny. So listeners, remember me bringing up Dark Five now as this, the quintessential evil group. The world destroyers. They wield this ultimate power, and it's really funny, I think, what they ended up turning into. But yeah, for me. Yeah. Sorry, no, go ahead.
I just was real quick. It sounds like you're describing a PS2 video game right now, which is funny,
right?
Because that's kind of the era that we're in, which is this. So it's funny, but
I think you're exactly right. Like thinking of things in terms of video games. So like, the character would go through this place, and you would fight these enemies, and this would be the boss of this chapter. I wasn't necessarily thinking in like a story structure. I was more thinking in like a video game structure. And that was something...
Which is like a story structure, but not what...
Yeah, like it's...
what a book story... Yeah, I mean...
like in a book, the character doesn't go along fighting enemies and getting experience.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have these moments where it's like, oh, cool fights. Like the cool fights kind of become like spectacles in and of themselves in a book, and there's a couple of them. You know what I mean? It's not like constant combat everywhere, because that would just get tiring.
And then, after this third fight on this page, the character Johansson breathes, turns around, and another Cyclops. And he goes, "Oh, here we go again." And yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But at the same time,
ground.
Going and referencing our last episode again, these were the stories that I was going and acting out outside, where I would kind of act them out and remember them, and then write them down later. Just taking influence from anything and everything. I mean, I remember, it's funny because I know in the community it's not very well liked, but something like Final Fantasy Advent Children, I was like, this is the coolest shit I have ever seen. You know what I mean? Like
when I first saw the movie, I was like, this is so cool. I mean,
that's definitely inspiring. Cool. Yeah.
Cloud's motorcycle is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And just, I don't know. I just remember really liking that, early on when we watched it. And it's just I haven't seen it probably
gotta give
6 years, maybe longer, but.
Gotta give a shout out to the original Final Fantasy Versus 13 trailer. That one alone probably was so inspiring to me. I mean, do you remember that trailer? It was like the dark and somber rainy city and the little emo guy, and he had this floating swords, and he was like throwing the swords and teleporting to them and like killing people, and there's blood, and I was like, this game is gonna be the best. But it never, you know, at least in my childhood, it never came out. It came out when I was an adult. But so what was I left with? I had to make up my own version of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because even to this day, the idea of like multiple swords and using like telepathy basically to like use them, and like almost like this other like sentient kind of being basically controlling them, is like something you still incorporate a lot when you're doing like D&D or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like it's still like just that will always be a really cool
I mean, you see it
way to do
around.
anything.
Yeah. And you know, so that was, I think, or not I think, but I know those are the early days for me. I mean, you know, like I filled up notebook on notebook of just handwritten stuff.
Countless.
You know, and, you know, I'd add in, I guess the best way to describe it is in games and in like anime when they have like kind of decorative text and art. I'd basically do that on the cover. It would be like, oh, the soul is split into 5 parts, and now this is how you get the 5 parts. Draw that, you know, write that out in a little artistic way. Draw a little vine. Draw a little character looking over the edge.
Were you ever that cheeseball?
I'm sure I was. I mean, that's the thing. Like I could go back and read that stuff and be like, man, this is garbage.
This is garbage. Garbaggio, as some people would say.
You know, but that's not to say that I don't. You know, not to say I don't like that early stuff, because I still do. But you know, you have to look at it from the lens of when it was written.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely crazy to kind of go back and just think about like how many nights like you were up just writing all the time, and like I know that definitely inspired me at one point to be like, hey, like I kind of want to do that too, like because he's creating all these worlds and all this kind of stuff, you know, and he's slowly making his own thing. I was like, I want to try to do it too, so that's why I started like writing my stuff, because I wasn't like, you know, because definitely at that point in time, like I was like, Charlie, like you're inspiring me to do this. I want to give it a shot. So
yeah,
I don't know how often I showed you what I was working on, but if you didn't write anything, I wouldn't have even tried to write anything. So
I mean, that's
a little shout out there.
No, that's really cool. I mean, it's, you know, I definitely remember because we shared a room growing up, and I did a lot of writing there. I probably did most of my writing in class, like listening to boring lectures. Like I would, because that's the thing is I realized I could get away with it. Like I could be taking notes, quote unquote, and just be writing the story out. And, you know, they would turn the light off. It'd be kind of dim, and I'd just be sitting there just writing away. And everybody's like, wow, Charlie, you're very studious over there. Look at all those notes you're taking. And I'm like, yeah.
In the pitch blackness too. Scrawling, usually.
You know, and it's funny. I look back at some of the early things I like. Sorry, I totally lost my train. I look back at some of the early things I have handwritten, and my handwriting looks exactly like our younger brother Henry. Like his handwriting and my handwriting, it looks really similar. And it's funny because now my handwriting is so much better. But I look back and I'm like, wow, why did I write so small?
Can you read your old handwriting?
Yeah, I can, but it's because I wrote it, so I kind of like. Yeah. I can just get back into that mindset. So,
yeah, I don't know why, but like whenever I want to write more, just because whenever I do write, my penmanship is so horrible that I'm like, I just need to get this better. So when I'm showing Ellie how to write, I'm not writing like complete garbage.
Right.
But whenever I do I never write out the word and. I do basic an ampersand, but it's just like a plus sign. But like so okay. follow the pen stroke here. So from top to bottom, keep it connected. You loop around that left side of the plus sign, and then straight across. Yeah. That's my and. And so I don't know why. I think it's because again I don't have a long attention. I have a short attention span. So
to write out the word and.
Yeah, I know, right? So,
I mean,
maybe I was like. Do you have any quirks with writing, or?
Yeah, I mean, in more recent times, I don't dot my I's or J's or like anything that needs to be dotted. I didn't used to, but I feel like it's obvious when you read a word, like what the letters are. I didn't used to, but now I put a little line through my sevens. Didn't used to do that. I don't know why I started doing that, but definitely.
That's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird, Charlie.
Yeah.
What are you, like 1,000 years old?
I don't do my 8s as like a continued line. I just do 2 circles on top of each other.
That's horrible. I feel like that's like a writing sin. You don't do a connected,
I feel like my
8.
No, I mean they're just 2 circles and they're touching. It just looks better. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's horrible.
I'll have to show you sometime.
I mean, I don't. Horrible. Maybe mine's horrible. Mine might be worse.
Because like I could never do the little like the sideways infinity sign basically for an 8. Like I would always make it, and like the 2 sides would kind of be all loopy. And I'm like, I hate this.
Yeah, I mean, my writing's like real sloppy, especially when it comes to like my signature. Like I just basically like cursive J, scribble, scribble, scribble. Kind of a cursive M, scroll, scroll, scribble, scribble. And I'm like, if I'm a doctor ever, this is legit looking. Is all I'm gonna say. Scribble, scribble, scribble. But so we get on to kind of like middle school, high school. I obviously at this point now I don't really write. Now I mean I'll jot down ideas, usually it's on the phone. I'll pull up like a notepad, and like write a few things down. But like even when it comes to planning or trying to like just put ideas to paper or whatever, like I don't write a lot, and which sucks because I forget things a lot.
Right.
But I just don't write down things. It's not something I do. I'll actually set an alarm like, hey, remember to do this, instead of writing it down at the time that I think about it. Because I know that the alarm, I'll at least look at it. So
it's funny because I think
now, like,
for me, when I write something down, even if I don't look at it
hold on. That was the worst interruption ever. I just want to say, I go now and you just go straight in. You just cut me off. Cut me off. But it's whatever. I forgot what I was going to say. So you go ahead. You have the floor. I'm fine over here.
I find that the act of writing something down, I'll write it down, and even if I don't look at it again, I will remember because I did write it down. Mm-hmm. That's all I was going to add. And then you had to make it so much of a bigger deal than it was.
Well, because like that was in my mind, because we do talk with each other sometimes, but usually one of us will just stop and be like, okay, that's just our dynamic. It's our dynamic.
I think what
but
the thing
that
is
was
the
worst one I've heard.
Yeah, but I think what I was worried about is we've been doing this thing where we'll like talk over each other and then we'll both stop. And there's just a silence. And so I was like, I'm going to hope that he stops. But the thing is you didn't stop.
Yeah, true.
Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
I know what you mean.
Mine it for a bit of humor.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, just shut up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
See, like that.
Just a little like rustle of papers and stuff. I don't have any papers except like a card. So I've been thinking more and more. I don't know what's been bringing it up. I don't know if either mom's brought it up when I go and visit her, or if it's just something I have been thinking about more. But I've been wanting to get into writing poetry again, and that might also be the fact that I'm trying to be more consistent in learning, and I've been consistent with trying to learn like how to actually produce music and that sort of thing. And so part of that is also me. Sometimes I'll jot down like, oh, here's some lyric ideas if I ever happen to need or use lyrics, And so I'm slowly getting back to it, and I do think it's healthy for me too, because it's another way to express yourself, and I think expressing yourself is always a good thing, as long as you're not, hurting anybody, obviously. So, but
right.
I just want to say, what are you doing now? But we all know Charlotte's released a book, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we have a little further to go, like in early history, because, so you're writing poetry, and it was really in high school that I had a couple of and I have to give a shout out to the pivotal teachers I had that actually, told me that I could write. Because before it had always been something for me, but I have to remember, I think it was a freshman teacher, I wrote something, and it was essentially like a short 3-page story that was about, because I used to sit in the car and imagine like characters like at an epic anime battle, like fighting alongside the speed of the car, like Naruto or One Punch Man style, like they're just like zooming around. And then that, translated to when I would be walking across, because our school was in an office complex right next to a Y. So when I had my gym class, there'd be a walk across this field, and I'd always, picture something other, and how it was always kind of on my mind. Like I would always see the world in that way. And that's kind of what that little short story is about. And I remember the teacher was like, hey, you need to submit this. Like you need to, and I was like, fine, okay, totally being like a little dick about it. And then after that, I think this was probably junior year. We had there was 2 events that stick out. So I think it was like one of my lit classes, we had to write a story based on Frankenstein. So Frankenstein. And
Frankenstein.
Do you know the story I wrote for this? I wrote the story about a sentient virus. So this scientist looking to cure the world basically released like an intelligent virus. And lo and behold, the virus kills everybody and causes an apocalypse. And the scientist just locks himself up in his house and like stays away from everybody.
Oh, that's horrible.
Because he's responsible. But at the end, it's him confronting the thing that he made that's at this point way more intelligent and way more worldly than he ever has been. And I remember my professor literally sat there and like read out the entire guy. I think it was like 10 pages. Read out the entire like 10-page story in our class, like over multiple like end of classes. And I was like, and everybody was like into it. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is something I wrote, and like other people are enjoying it. And so that was really informative for me, and that led on that
seems like it'd stick out significantly. I mean, you have someone who basically at the time you kind of look up to, like your professor, is like, this is enough to actually be a part of the class, essentially.
Right. And
which is cool.
For me, that was, I guess, so inspiring, and maybe something that you didn't have, and that's why I kept writing, is because of those moments like that where I did have that very crucial positive reinforcement to be like, no, you're good at this. Like, this is something you want to do. And so, and then in that same class, we all had to come up with a final project, and I came up with a story for the project, which was all about little, what are they, the marionette dolls that have the strings attached to them?
Yes.
And so this story was like a Tim Burton-esque style story about these dolls that were like in like basically like a puppet world. And then one day, one of the dolls, they find that his strings have been cut. And they're like, uh-oh, what's going on? And it turns out that the dolls are basically in an attempt to free themselves. They're cutting their own strings. Because they feel like they're being controlled. And so... I
mean, it's pretty good.
We're gonna do like a whole like actual like puppet thing for it. I don't think it ever got done, but those are definitely reasons why going into college. I mean, I had a brief stint to where I was like, oh, I can't be a writer. I need to do something people are gonna be impressed with. So for the second there, I was gonna be an architect, and then last minute,
I remember that very briefly.
Yeah, and then last minute, I was like, you know what? I don't actually want to do this. I want to be a writer. And I like ran over to like the English building and talked to the advisor, and I was like, hey, I want to be a writer. And he's like, okay, cool.
Okay.
And so, yeah, college, I think definitely I'll pass it back to you, but college is definitely like the next like ground of writing for me. That was both an improvement and,
Yeah, well,
also,
I mean, I guess that kind of leads off to where I did jump ahead a little bit, but
no, that's fine. It's fine.
we're
It's fine.
kind of flying by the seat. Yeah, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit here. We're being a bit more freeform with this one, so just I'm on edge here. I mean, that kind of leads into where I was going.
Yeah.
So now you have released a book and you are actually putting stuff out there. Mm-hmm. So when, I guess the big question I have for you is like, when did you feel like, because after college, when did you really feel like you were almost done with the book? And what kind of led you to be like, well, like, this is actually good. I want to publish what I have now and get some feedback on it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Because I feel like it's a big step from just kind of writing something. It's basically been only in your head this whole time, without a few readings here and there, to being like, hey, check us out, please.
Right.
Essentially at this point, your life's work, which is interesting to think about. But.
So I guess to rewind a little bit, through college, that's
again.
Yeah. Well, through college, I didn't really cover some of the college stuff, but I think it's kind of informative to what eventually led me to actually writing a book. I would say that's probably the start of my serious writing, where I wrote like a 20-page short story for my intro to like a creative writing class called The Silence of Mr. Abstract, which was just a weird story. Really
That's
got
such
into
a good name.
I got into poetry a lot. I like took a couple semesters of poetry and got really into it. So that's so interesting that you talk about doing poetry early, and then I kind of loop back around to it. And for me, I think poetry was a very good exercise into writing, because my writing style was always very sparse, and I hate to say this because I feel like it's just, I don't know, one of those lame artist things, but my writing style was always very sparse and just artistic. And so going into poetry, that was like, oh, this is what poetry is. Like, I can be sparse and I can be, I don't have to be specific. Some of the ones I wrote down that I remember very fondly is I wrote a poem called The Feral Gods. I wrote a poem called Yggdrasil. Just poems like that were, I could actually like experiment with capturing the whole image and putting things down. And then after that, I took like 3 or 4 classes of the same fiction writing class, where that was really, the challenge is that, and where I learned to take critique is because you would spend a month and a half basically writing a 20-page short story. Then you print it out. It would be passed out. And then your data for critique would come, and everyone would have read it and everyone would have marked it up. And you had to sit there silently and basically have your story critiqued. People would be like, well, I didn't really get this. And you couldn't say anything, because the whole idea was that if it's not written down, like you can't talk to the author. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, like, everything had to be on the page. So that was like, that was where I made some of my good writing friends, and where I learned to really take criticism and go on from there, where I learned a lot of writing rules, like actually how to write. And then I think going from there, after I was done, there was definitely a period of time where I only wrote when I felt inspired to write, and I never really got anything done. Like, I slowly chipped away at like the big story I'd been writing. Slowly did this. And then I wouldn't say, leading back up to your question, I don't think I really sat down and told myself, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm actually going to be a writer and not just play at being a writer. I don't think I did that until, a year and a half, 2 years ago. More like a year and a half. And I told myself, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, and I'm going to finish this book.
Wow.
And so that, I had maybe 80, 90 pages of material before that. And then, so from a year and a half ago is when I really sat down and told myself, hey, I'm going to finish it. And then that was the alpha copy that I ended up, printing out myself and handing out to people. And it's crazy because I'd have to say, sorry to interrupt you, but I would have to say that I've probably learned more about writing, doing it daily, and not waiting for that moment of inspiration, but making it a practice. I've probably become a way better writer than I ever was, all throughout college, all throughout those early days. Because you learn a lot when, you don't feel creative, but you still are like, I have to do this. Like, you learn how to write, and you learn what you're writing.
That consistency, then, just kind of like, even if it's not good, to your standards or whatever, like, you still need to practice and get something down.
Right.
So that's what you should become a regular. So when you do have those days where you kind of feel defeated and you're like, that's not very good, I don't know, it doesn't get you down as much because you've been doing 1,000 words a day, for however long. So you're like, you're going to have dull moments or days when you're like, I don't know what to write in the book. Okay, we'll just write 1,000 words of something,
Right.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it kind of proves that consistency is kind of a big factor when it comes to learning and just kind of self-growth. So,
right. And, it's funny because I still have, I still keep in contact with some of my college friends, and the roommate that I used to live with, I always thought was a very talented writer. Liked making big fantasy worlds, was really into world building, really into tabletop RPGs. So that was his forte. So they're very much the same as mine, but he didn't continue that practice. And he always is saying, he's always like, oh man, I wish I should write more. And I'm like, at some point you do just have to sit down and do it. Now, I'm not saying you have to sit down and write out 1,000 words. Like, cause I'm sure when you hear that, you're like, that sounds insane. But I think it's always just important. And a podcast I've been listening to, Tales of the Fantastic.
Tales of the Fantastic.
Yeah. Created by our uncle.
Tales of the Fantastic podcast.
And a family friend. They always have writing advice in there. And I think some of the stuff they say is spot on. And everybody will always tell it to you. They'll say, hey, you have to read a lot and you have to write all the time. And that's the only way you'll get better. And you hear that and you're like, that can't be true. But it really is. I mean, I've improved so much. I don't read a whole lot now, but I listen to so many audiobooks. I mean, and I think that was really I'd rediscovered why I liked writing. Because, for a time there, after going through a professional writing where you're trying to write these short fiction stories, you get really concerned with, I can't have battles, I can't have magic, because that's not real writing. And to an extent, if you're writing short fiction, it's not. And it's very rare to pull off something that is considered academically good within that category. But then I kind of just rediscovered the things I did like, and then I started reading the things I did like again. And that has been great. I think, especially going into ending thoughts, those are definitely things I'll bring up, the things I listen to now, the things I'm writing now. I mean, it's been 6 months since I've finished that alpha copy. And I feel like the writing I'm doing now is miles ahead of the writing that's in that alpha copy. And it's wild. I go back and I read it and I'm like, why was I doing this? I could just do it like this. And it's insane. I'm like, this is weird, because I've never seen such growth in my life because I never did it consistently. And if you never do something consistently, you're kind of going to stay at that same level. So,
yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's something for me. I've been, obviously pair with the class, but I've been doing, this is off the topic of books, but just on a matter of consistency. It's I've been doing Duolingo Norwegian I had a 50-day streak the other day. And I was like, wow. In the back of my head, I'm like, I don't, am I have I learned enough? But it's like, no, like you've done it for 50 days. Like that's some dedication. And for me, like that was a big milestone. I was like, I know it's small. I was like, 20, 30 minutes a day, but like it's consistency. And it's helping me learn that lesson that like, even if the progress is slow, you'll still be able to look back a month, 2 months, 6 months and be like, hey, like you knew way more than you did and how to apply it way more than you did. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's interesting to say.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go back. Yeah. You go back and like you say that the alpha copy is way different than what you'd write now. Like it makes me want to read the alpha copy because I haven't had a chance to get my hands on it really. Right. So you can read that. And so when you do release the next version or whatever, like just to see how different it is, from that, but it's coming from the same head. It's just going to be interesting, I think. So I don't know. It's definitely inspiring also just to hear you kind of say that. And also kind of confirms to me that like, yeah, like I need to work on that myself too. And cause like, obviously you and I were not old, but like we're close to 30. And it's like, I feel like I should have some kind of direction and or some kind of pretty good knowledge on some things. And it's just, the more I'm going through life, the more it's like consistency and pushing yourself on days you don't feel like it. Yeah. Not to the point where you burn yourself out, but just to where it's a habit.
No, that's entirely the key. I mean, what I was going to cut in with earlier is when you look back after doing something for 50 days, you look back and you're like, even let's say you know how to say 5 words. Well, that's 5 more words than you would know how to say if you never did it, or if you did it inconsistently. And it's one of those things where you don't put so much pressure on yourself to put out. And this I don't think applies only to writing, but applies to really kind of any practice, to like working out, to being an artist, to learning a new practice. Don't ever like podcasting. Don't ever like expect perfection and expect all these results right away, because with just your life, like, growing up and being a teenager, you're not being like, oh man, this is where my life is going and these are the results I'm expecting. Like all of a sudden one day you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like I have learned so much from all these life experiences. And it's the same thing, is you have to allow the build naturally. And something people will get on to me because I'm like, man, I look back at that alpha copy now and I just think it's kind of trash. And people are like, no, Charlie, it's not trash. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying I think it's trash and that it wasn't worth doing, because if I hadn't have done that and put that all together and made that a thing that other people could read, like I have learned so much from that. And so it's exciting because I'm like, where am I going to be in 5 years? Like going through this and doing it over and over, even if I never see results, is so internally satisfying and something that keeps me going because, like you're saying, like I don't have like a career going right now as far as job wise. And so it's really easy, especially in our society, to look at yourself and compare to other people and be like, God, I don't have that. I don't have the car. I don't have the house. I don't have the job. I don't have the money.
You can look online. Oh, someone who's 18 is a millionaire now because he got lucky online, and now it's like sponsorships and all that. And you're like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? But it's like, it's so hard to get down on yourself because you see so much success. Because like, again, like basically most modern society is tailored towards that's all you see. You don't see, the person who's 50 who had a breakout, say like a director breakout movie. Oh, he's 50 years old. He's not 22. He's not 30. Like he's been working at this for however long. So like, oh, hi, Rukia. It's definitely a lot of things just take some perspective and just a lot of, you have to push yourself even when you're uncomfortable. So
and you have to, it's all about, finding that success and defining what success is to you. Because if you, believe that you are a successful person and then that's the person that you present to the world, then you'll find those people who think that's valuable. And, I think you and I have been lucky enough in our lives to, find partners, to have a family that, that does value who we are and not the product of what we have done. You know what I mean? Because there were I know so many people who are like, oh, my parents made me do this. My parents made me do that. And to take a step back, I don't want to like look at somebody who had funding through college, who didn't have to pay for it, and be like, man, you don't get it. You're not a real person. Because that's not true. But what I'm saying is that, I would look at those people and be like, man, I'm so behind. I'm never going to catch up. I'm never going to be this person, without ever asking myself, what kind of like, but what do I want though? Like, because isn't that what's most important? Like, because at the end of the day, like, who am I going to spend the rest of my life with? Well, it's going to be me. Like, shocker. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these people come in and out of your life. And so, you have to be happy with who you are, not to the point of delusion, but to the point of like confidence, I would say.
So, I mean, kind of, again, closing down a little bit here. When could we expect the next version of the book? / are you going to be putting out short stories or anything? Like, some feels like, hey, little publishing company for like short story compilations or online, whatever. Like, are you doing anything in that space, or have you explored what goes into that?
I haven't really. In fact, I've been really inspired again by Tales of the Fantastic and their little audio short story productions that they do at the end of their podcasts. And in fact, I want to say on the podcast, it was Joe, and his writing advice was, instead of working on a big novel, instead of working on this, spend time writing a short story from start to finish. And I heard that and I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll try that. And so, because I don't always feel like chugging away at the book I'm writing. So I take breaks and I just write something different. So at least I'm writing every day. And I wrote this like really cool, short, super dark sci-fi story. And I was like, oh, that was really good. Yeah, because I wrote it start to finish. It was done. You're finished with it and you can move on. Because you could write, and I believe, Matt in that same podcast says something similar. You could spend a whole year writing the same novel and then look back and be like, well, that novel's crap. But then oppositely, you could spend a whole year writing short stories and maybe have 50 of them and be like, hey, there's
a couple of good ones in there.
40 of these are crap, but 10 of these are really good. And you know what I mean? Like, so it's like just throw it all at the wall. And I really like short stories because I can just be weird. Because oftentimes I have so many different weird ideas. So short stories, I think, are definitely a space that I want to get into to really like experiment and flex different muscles and try out different styles. And because, it can be exhausting writing the same thing over and over.
Honestly, we have talked about this, but that might be an idea for our next episode even. Like we could, starting today, write a short story and either record it or read it out loud, live.
Yeah.
I think it'd be kind of cool. So that might be the next episode or might be a future one. So definitely just, I don't know. I know like we lived together for a long time, obviously. And so like I know of a lot of your writing, but it is kind of fun hearing all the details and kind of just your thought process on it, because I really haven't asked you about that often. So
yeah, and it's fun to talk about because
insight.
I can't always just have this conversation with people because it's not that people don't care, but getting into like the minutia of a craft, people are like, okay, but I don't do that. Ooh, so good word. Minutia. I have, before we wrap up, I have like one small thing I want to talk about, just like inspiration and like the books I've been reading. But I'll ask you the question first. So with the stories, like just in your sphere, and this can be movies, this can be video games, it can be things you've heard or kind of heard. If you could start writing poetry or short stories, what would you want to do? Like, what would you want to write? Like, subject matter? Would you want to write, like, epic battles? Would you want to write something a little bit more ponderous? Like, what have you thought about?
So, I'm kind of an emotional guy. I feel like...
Kind of.
I definitely love exploring just the way people feel. And when I watch, a lot of like either shows or animes that I watch, a lot of them are very, like, I tend to go towards things that are more quote unquote real, like set like in a real world, and just kind of more so play on the way people interact and their emotions. And so,
yeah,
I've been thinking about like, it'd be fun to write just kind of like the aspect of like what it's like to be like, a father, to a child, like just like the thoughts you have, your mindset, because there's so many times you're like, oh, like I'm a great dad. Other days you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, am I failing? Am I doing this right? Or just I don't know. I kind of like writing. I like writing sad things, and or things that
I do. I totally feel that. Yeah.
Just because like it's a good outlet, because like I'm not sad, and I do a good job of keeping myself going. But it's just, I think it's good to express that though, even if you don't necessarily feel like you need to. It's just like, you need to make sure like, you're covering your bases. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but so I'd write more in the real world, just more like emotion kind of driven writing. I think if I were to write and or do poetry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I would say if you ever wanted some inspiration, I think delving into short fiction, I have a couple of like just collections of short stories. And reading those short stories, I mean, oftentimes that's what they're about. These short stories pick something minute because, you think to yourself, you're like, how am I going to fill up 20 pages? Well, and what it comes down to is that you have to pick a very small idea and basically, expand that idea. And a lot of my short stories, when I was writing them, especially my fiction short stories, all focused on, and this is really kind of sad, and maybe it was my way to examine like past failed relationships I had, but all of my short stories would center around a couple like on the verge or breaking up, and basically not understanding why that was and going through why that was. You know what I mean? So
interesting. Yeah.
I have several short stories, and my best one that I wrote, I think it was called Dog. And it was about this couple, and they were going on a road trip to a concert, driving down this back highway, and then this dog runs out in the middle of the street, and they run it over. And this guy is torn up about it. And he like wants to take it, and he wants to bury it. And his girlfriend just gets really like upset with him because she reacts to it differently. Like she gets angry about it. Like, why didn't you see this? Like, why didn't you do something? Like, but if you're going 80 on the highway and something runs out to the middle of the road, like, and it was all him basically obsessing about this dog and how that obsession was the breaking point in their relationship. So I definitely know what you mean by like wanting to focus on those sad moments and those moments that are quiet and kind of like contemplative. So,
yeah.
Well, I think for me, there's a couple more things I want to talk about. I know we're past the hour mark here, so if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I don't mind one bit. I know I was kind of leading it at the beginning, but, I like hearing you speak, man, so.
Thanks. I don't like hearing you speak.
So you go ahead.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about my influences now. And for anybody who likes fantasy, who likes, kind of dark stories, I think we'll definitely kind of get a kick out of this and like my inspirations now. So the fantasy story that I read that I was like, oh, I do really like fantasy was a trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. It's called Mistborn. And it's this super kind of dark world called the Final Empire that's under, it's almost like the sun is too close and there's these volcanoes that are constantly erupting. So it's raining ash all the time. And it has this really cool magic system in it called allomancy, which is all about ingesting metals. And all these metals have different properties that you can burn inside of your body and like give you a boost or a power. But it's just, he goes and he takes that, and it's just the execution of those ideas really satisfying, really good. Definitely one of those stories that has a lot of hype moments, you know, like there's some awesome battles in there where you're like, oh yeah, buddy. You know, you're like, definitely some like anime moments, you know, when you watch those really good anime fights, there are some moments in there where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, yeah, so let me pull up my Audible list here. Yeah, so
here we go. Pulling up the lists.
Yeah, so Brandon Sanderson, he also is writing a bigger series now that's not finished called The Way of Kings. I think I personally, I'm getting a little burnt out of these longer running fantasy series because they kind of follow the same trajectory of like, oh, hey, I'm a new character and I have some special gifts. Oh, but the world is way darker than I thought. Oh, but I'm getting more powerful. Oh, I'm going to save the world. Oh, it's going to be hard and I'm going to suffer. People are going to die, but ultimately I'll be successful. You know what I mean? Like stories like that where you're like, that's just, and I think that's being really disrespectful to the people who put so much time and energy into writing like a 5-book series. I'm kind of speaking more of like, there's an author, Brent Weeks, who wrote the Lightbringer series. It's a lot like that. Really cool world, really cool powers, but I felt the story was a little lacking, but that's just me listening to a book and judging this person's years of work. So not to downplay it, but I think I personally am getting a little tired of it.
Oh, there you go.
Definitely Lord of the Rings.
Downplayed it.
Lord of the Rings is something that's really popular in culture right now, but going back and reading that original book or listening to it, I was constantly blown away by how good it was and how wrapped up in the story I got, and wrapped up in a story that, you know, I know how Lord of the Rings ends, but man, the world, I couldn't talk about that enough. A little shout out to a book by Scott Hawkins called The Library on Mount Char, a really weird book about set in kind of our world, but very heavy on the magical realism and weirdness going on with higher understandings of like what the world means. Have to, again, this is a big one for me if you want something that's really dark, but anything by Cormac McCarthy. Wrote The Road, All the Pretty Horses, No Country for Old Men. I mean, couldn't say enough about that. I had a little stint where I got into some Lovecraft, read through the entire Necronomicon. Lovecraft, of course, you kind of have to take him with a grain of salt, but there's some stuff in there that is like fantastic. You know, I think you have to fight past some of his just extreme xenophobia he has for people that are different than him.
Oh gosh.
But you know, there's some stuff in there that is wild, and just like you read it and you're like, this is breaking my brain. Like,
wait, what's happening?
And then I think for me, God, there's a really good sci-fi series. The first one's called Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And Hyperion was so inspiring to me now. This was this sci-fi book that was incredibly detailed, incredibly just wild with some of the ideas that it had and how it transcended. There's this line between high technology and then kind of how that breaks into the metaphysical world and consciousness as we understand it. And that book, I think, was so inspiring to me and so cool. Hyperion, like the first one, I think is by far the best and is just really, really good. Of course, now I'm going through and I'm reading all the Dune books. I can't, you know, those are also of course. Just these amazing worlds and books. And I could list, you know, countless others just looking at my bookshelf. You know, you got East of Eden. Of course, you got Harry Potter on there. You know, you got Silmarillion, I haven't come to like anime, so I have like Berserk on there. You know, anything by like Uzumaki if you want some like really good like horror manga. I could go on and on. Oryx and Crake by, what's her name? She also wrote The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know. I can't remember her name. It's going to bother me. Fill some space for just a second.
It's going to bother me. I'm filling some space while I sit here and decide what I want to talk about. But today's episode's been a bit all over the place. But, well, as far as my end goes, a little less planned than usual. But, you know, I thought that it went pretty well. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think Charlie's got a few things he wants to talk about. But, you know, I just want to say thank you guys for listening. We're not closing just yet. Don't click away. You know, I just really appreciate it. And just the feedback you guys could give. Oh?
Her name is Margaret Atwood. Give me a second so I can grab my cat so she's not meowing all over the end of this.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were doing, but okay. No, but I definitely I appreciate you guys listening. Feedback's awesome. You can reach us at raconteurcollection@gmail.com. You know, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on a lot of places. If we're not somewhere, email us, hit us up on Twitter. You know, we'll try to get everywhere for you guys to listen to. So
LinkedIn,
isn't that for like business?
Yeah. But yeah, I guess kind of to wrap it up. Yeah. Thanks, and especially to you, Jack. Thanks so much for just letting me talk. I'm sure I rambled on about everything, but it's nice to talk about. I mean, this stuff is what I enjoy doing, and really what I hope to turn into a job. You know, it's not a job now, but this is the kind of stuff that I could work, 80 hours a week and love doing. I'm sure making it a job would come with its own set of challenges as everything in life, but God, that would be, if I could, be paid to write these stories and be paid to publish and, you're even smaller scale, like,
just
great.
Just doing things on your own. It's crazy to think that, you've been doing it for so long, but you still have this burning passion for it. And it seems like you just keep kind of rediscovering why you love doing it, and it just reinforces it. So it's super cool. Yeah. And honestly, of course, we have the podcast. I don't know how many people are going to be listening to this, but, guys, like, he's a good writer. We'd love for you to check out his stuff when he has links to it. But, can't give him enough praise, because he's definitely written a lot more than I think most people have. So,
well, and here and there,
good, obviously, but
using this podcast as kind of a platform, I think it would be really nice to just have little bonus episodes, because ever since Jack, very nicely gave me this microphone, I've just experimented with it and recorded a couple short stories and, just had fun with it. It'd be fun, I think, to put those in somewhere just so people could listen to it to get a little idea. And then fun for me to have a place to put it, Yeah,
it'd be, I think, a cool idea. Obviously, I'd want to get some feedback before we do it, maybe. But we basically have like a short stories compilation #1. And it's just like, it's like an hour and a half of just short stories, either read by you or by me, just kind of just to put it out there, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be kind of cool.
Well,
I tell you, and this is our longest one yet.
Yeah. I do have something I do want to do for the end of this podcast. I would like to read my poem Yggdrasil to close it out.
Okay.
So if you want to round us out with any other thing, I know you kind of have been, but
yes. Yeah. Let me just go ahead and say, Charlie's going to close this out with a fantastic little poem he wrote. But I want to say thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot. Again, you can reach us at raconteurcollection@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, Spotify, YouTube, yada, 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 anywhere. Any questions, honestly, just DM us on Twitter. Easy place. Our music, again, is by Tylercunningham.
Masterfully.
Gracefully. I don't know if that's the right word. He masterfully made this music. Gracefully responded to the email. There you go. I incorporated it. And it's allowing us to, use that track. Yeah. So I just want to, if you need some music for what you're doing.
Exactly the type of music I wanted when I was thinking of music for this. We found it and I was like, oh, yeah, that's it.
We are, I currently have a buddy of mine. I got Chris working on hopefully a potential official logo. So, and we might get that on not now, but at some point, some shirts. And in the future, might work on a website. Just, we're going to see how things go. Right now, this is just for fun. So we'd love some feedback. Charlie, do you want to close us off with your poem?
I'll take it away here. Give you a little taste, a little treat.
Take it away.
Okay.
Give me your reading voice.
Sorry. All right, here we go. Yggdrasil. I was told a story from the peak of the world, old gods that traversed ashen shores. Before our cities, theirs existed, before carport oceans, before our streets so coarse. I guess it's a little ridiculous to say that there are untold stories. This one may be a lie. I'm not sure of my sins, but if I have to tell, I'll have to tell. I will lie. Clouds spoke with snow, spoke with thunder, spoke with rain. But wait, this is the peak of the world, a home, a place close enough to reflect the sky in your eyes. Little bright bugs or spiral fractals, untold constellations, collisions of stars and planets. This is the peak of the world, the top of the mountain, of everything. I began with a question. What, oh what, existed before God held dark waters? Was he always, had he always been, always will? No, there were others, a world, a collective but separate. The lie I was told from the peak of the world, a star-choked and despised story. Citrus cities built from thought, a divergence of the human versus inhuman, godlike, a collective but separate, a lie, a place, the peak of the world. Time before time, place before place, wild gods would plant their imaginings, little seeds of thought doomed to be lost. Oh, the oblivion and abyss of it all, the nihilism of everything. Thoughts that grew, memories learned to produce wings. Feral gods, they knew, but they knew not, they thought not. This is the part where I lose people. You, me, we lose track of the details. Existence is defined, determined by what does not exist. Trees defined by leaves, plants by seeds. This is the lie I was told from the peak of the world. A star-choked, famine-eyed beast, the antithesis. The hunter is to be expected, an opposite has to exist. I guess it's ridiculous to say. There are untold stories, spoken in snow, thunder, and rain, reflections of the cosmic and something so human, gods destroyed by a calamity, birthed from them, by them, a self-correcting design, built by instinct, the collective, the singular, knew of no other way to stay whole, other than to split into parts, dark for dark, light for light, and lastly, a lie. We, all of you who hear this, will one day become like them at some point, and you'll tell a story, a lie, to one so small. Thank you, everybody. This has been the Raconteur Collection. Bye.
Bye-bye.